Good morning. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Bob Shrum, the director of the Center for the Political Future here at USC Dornsife, and welcome to our annual Warschaw Conference on Practical Politics. Whether you're here with us at Town and Gown, or watching on one of our social media platforms, or we'll hear this later on our podcast, Let's Find Common Ground. Now, I want to turn this over for a few minutes to my longtime political adversary and the center's co-director, Mike Murphy, who always leavens any serious discussion of politics with a large dose of wit and humor, often at my expense. Mike?
Thank you, Bob. Yes, Bob Shrum. Well, thank you, Bob, for that introduction, the jokes I wrote. No, seriously, it is a highlight every year here at the center when we get people here to talk about the thing we all love, occasionally fear, politics. So we have an incredible panel. We have amazing guests here. The great Dick Gephardt is here for our kickoff thing. Yeah. Hero of the American auto industry, I'll add, as a Detroit kid. And so we're looking forward to it. I think we're going to focus on what's happening now and, most interestingly, what might happen in the future. So put on your seatbelt, get ready for good questions. And Bob, let's do it.
So next, I want to introduce William Deverell, the Divisional Dean for Social Sciences at Dornsife. He's a champion of the center and of our commitment to model and advance a politics where we respect each other and we respect the truth. Bill, the podium is yours.
Good morning, everyone. I am delighted to offer these follow-up welcoming remarks to all of you gathered here this morning, either with us in person or through the social media venues that you may be using. Opening events for the center is honestly one of the pleasures of my divisional dean position here at Dornsife. That's because of a confluence of factors. One, I'm impressed by these CPF colleagues. They roll up their sleeves, they think up big events, tackling big issues. They get out their Rolodexes, or whatever passes for a Rolodex these days. Whatever it is, their versions of that thing are thick, tried and true, impressive. Look at today's program and just look around you. But these are also colleagues and friends. Bob and Mike, Kami, Diego, all the fellows and students, all the CPF staff and supporters who both believe in what they do and are expert at it. It goes without saying that nurturing civil and civic dialogue about our nation, its practices, its laws, its history, and its myriad challenges is of critical importance to all of us. Those of us who live within the boundaries of what constitutes these United States, and I truly believe for people and institutions across the globe. Goes without saying, but I'll say it anyway. And what CPF does transcends our USC Dornsife College, our university, our city, and our state. We cannot slap ourselves on the back, though, amidst all this amalgam of expertise and courage gathered in Town and Gown today. Beyond that, beyond the gem-like quality of CPF as a public-facing think tank of democratic values and democracy itself, are the ideas and vision for a sustainable political future for the United States on the cusp of our 250th birthday as a nation. Pride in what we do here with these committed expert colleagues is something we can all share across whatever aisles come between us, but do not divide us. But what truly tells is how we come together at stellar conferences like this, how we take in evidence and expertise, how we participate in this gathering of ideas, and especially the ways in which we leave from today's proceedings renewed in the collective commitment to our better angels and to one nation indivisible. Welcome to USC. Please enjoy your day with us. I'll turn it back to Bob.
So our first panel today will be a conversation between me and former Democratic House Leader Richard Gephardt. I first met him during the 1988 presidential campaign. where I worked for him and where he came closer after winning the Iowa caucuses than many realized to capturing the Democratic nomination. For a long time, he was a powerful force in Congress, and he is one of the most straightforward, intellectually gifted, and fair-minded people I have ever met in politics. That character will be a key to our discussion today. Dick, you want to? So what I want to do here is talk analytically, not in partisan terms, about what's happened in Congress and why reaching across the aisle seems increasingly out of reach. I should note at the outset, by the way, that I'm biased. You're a remarkable friend, and thank you for joining us today. In the Congress where you served in the leadership for nearly 20 years, it certainly was, at least at the beginning, a place where Democrats and Republicans could find common ground on essential public issues. I'm thinking, for example, of the budget deal that was negotiated between Democrats and President George H.W. Bush in 1980, which does not get enough credit for its role in enabling the country by the end of that decade to achieve a balanced budget for the first time in 3 decades. Can you talk about that and about other examples where the parties managed to come together for the sake of the country?
Well, it's great to, first of all, it's great to be here. I'm always thrilled to be with my friend Bob Shrum, who has a better facility with the language that we all share than any human I've ever met. He also has tremendous political skills, and so all of you who work with him here are really fortunate to have such a fabulous resource at this university. I'm also happy to see my old friend Murphy. And what I'd tell you is that Bob protected me against his harsh attacks for many years. So to answer this question and put it in context, I think I've got to start at 1789. In that year, our founders had a radical idea that no country had ever had in human history. They believed that the people of this country, there weren't many then, but there were quite a few, could govern themselves. They didn't want a king. They didn't want a pharaoh. They didn't want a potentate. They thought the people could govern themselves. I had the great privilege of being in the middle of that at the federal level for 28 years. I was leader of the Democrats for 14 years in the House. And what I want you to understand, just imagine you're now on a committee of 535 people. That's Congress. You all come from different parts of this gigantic, diverse country. And your job, your responsibility, is to decide controversial issues on behalf of the people. It's really hard. There were days when I was leader that I didn't think we were ever going to get anything done. But we did. It took far too long. It would be far more efficient to have one human being make all those decisions. That's the alternative. And I call that Plan B of human governance through human history, is the authoritarian model. It's so much faster. It's so much more efficient. It's so decisive that the people who are governed by it kind of give up to it. We didn't want that. We still don't want that. So, Bob, how did we make it work? It's hard work. Hard work. When I was leader, I pulled 60 Democrats. I increased the leadership from 4 to 60, and I put them in a room in the Capitol every night at 5 o'clock for 2 hours. And I picked them from all across the country, far left liberals to far right center Democrats. And I asked them simply to listen to one another. I never said a word. I listened. Because my job was, how do I get a thread through 218 people? And then once we got a consensus in our party, which as Tip O'Neill used to say would be in any other country, would be 5 separate political parties, we then had to go talk to the Republicans, and they had 5 separate political parties, to try to reach a consensus to get something done. My best friend when I was leader was Bob Dole. I'd go to his office every day. We'd talk. How do we get this done? How do we do that? What's going on with this? What's going on with that? What can you do? What can I do? He was the funniest man I ever met. One day I went in his office. He was always joking. He had great jokes. He was funny. And he was dark, he was mean, he was angry. I said, Bob, what's wrong? He said, come over here, and goddamn conservatives are driving me nuts. I said, okay, come over with me, and the goddamn liberals are driving me nuts. That's how you get it done. So, but that was a different time. That was quite a while ago. And we can talk when you want about my quiz analysis of why we are where we are now, when we can't make that work as well.
Yeah. When I was a lot younger, now that you brought up Bob Dole, I was the chief counsel and staff director of what was then called the Senate Committee on Nutrition and Human Needs, the Hunger Committee. George McGovern was chairman of it, and we got Bob Dole to become the other champion of food stamps. So as Jesse Helms tried to destroy food stamps, Dole just stood in the way and said this is not going to happen. And you're right, by the way, he could be angry, I think, as the result of his war injuries.
Yeah.
Where he had spent a whole year in a full body cast. But he also was a very funny man who had a lot of sympathy for the underdog. So what changed? Were there forces in both parties that contributed to the situation we're in now?
I've got to start this by saying we've always had really broad divisions and disagreements among the American people. You have to have that. I mean, in your own family, you have disagreements. So how in the world could you have easy agreement among 340 million people? So you go into this knowing that everybody disagrees with everybody on everything. That's nothing new. But what's happened? And I've thought a lot about this, Bob, because I'm really worried that if democracy can't function on behalf of the American people to make those compromises, to resolve those big issues, the American people are understandably going to give up on it. That's what I'm worried about. People will look at, people come up to me all the time and say, hey, Congress is kind of dysfunctional. What's going on? And I say, yeah, it is. I agree. It's pretty dysfunctional. But don't look at Congress. Look at the American people. If the people are bitterly polarized, Congress is bitterly polarized. It's a reflection of the people. These are representatives of the people. So they're having to represent the people. And what I've noticed is that both Democrats and Republicans today are unable to compromise, as we did, because they'd get kicked out. People would unelect them. I used to go to members to get a hard vote on a budget or some really tough issue, and they'd say, yeah, I should vote for it, but I can't. And I'd say, why not? And they'd say, well, I don't think I can get reelected. And I would say, why did you come here? Did you come here for this stupid job? Or did you come here to help the country, to help the people that trusted you and gave you the vote? That's your job. And then I'd also say this was kind of unfair. I'd say, well, let me ask you a question. What if the 19-year-olds that were on the landing craft coming into Normandy in 1944, as they were getting toward the beach, had turned to the commanding officer and said, I know I should attack the beach, but I really can't because I might get killed. The test of public service is country over party and country over self. It's that simple. And so sometimes that would work, sometimes it wouldn't, but that's the test. And that is what we have to get back to. Let me add one note. I'm part of 2 or 3 groups that are trying to reform social media, trying to hold on to our democracy. So I get the opportunity to go up on the Hill time to time and talk to members, new members, Republican members, Democratic members. And I want to give you a sense of optimism that I have, because I met a lot of these members in both parties, young people that have come to Congress for the right reasons. And I am optimistic that we can get back to the kind of culture that I was able to operate in, where people respected one another, they listened to one another, and they were willing to try to find the compromises or the solutions that they could vote for, even if it endangered their political career. So I'm hopeful.
Yeah, going back to that time, can you describe some of your own interactions and personal relationships with Republicans? I'm thinking of your carpool buddy.
Yeah. So this is a great story. So when I got elected in 1976, I had a young family, I had young kids, and in my campaign, I had said to my hoped-for constituents that if I won the seat, that I was going to move my family to Washington, because in those days there weren't many airplanes. They gave us no money to fly, so you had to drive back and forth from St. Louis to Washington. You couldn't do that every weekend. And I said, I've got young kids. I'm just not willing to be away from them most of the time. I'm not going to do that. So if you don't want that, don't elect me. And I got elected for some unknown reason. And so I moved the family to Northern Virginia. And we had bought a house. And I was always worried every month to make the payment on the house. And it was, but it was a fun and wonderful time. Down the street from me lived Dan Quayle. And another fellow who was another representative from Missouri, Ike Skelton, who I'd known before. And so every morning I had a Chevette. I had this little bitty white car, and it was a two-door, and Quayle would get in the back seat and Ike would sit in the front seat, and I would drive them into the Capitol, and then after the meeting was over at night, I'd drive them back. So to finish this story, when Mike Pence was being asked to blow up the election in 2020, which you may remember, one of the important calls he made for advice was to Dan Quayle. And I know that Dan Quayle told him, you have to follow the law. You have to put country over self. And that's what Mike Pence did. And I ask you this morning, just think what would have happened in this country if Mike Pence had not done that. Of, by, and for the people. That's it. This is the greatest country in human history. Why? Democracy, rule of law, freedom, capitalism. That's my opinion. You don't have to share it, but those are the four elements. And at the top of the list is rule of law. Because the only way you can make this self-governing mechanism work is if you have rules that people accept and follow. And that's what happened on January the 6th, 2020. And it happened because Mike Pence did the right thing for the country. Not for himself, but for the country.
Let's talk about the impact of the way Congress now schedules itself. Members of the House and Senate now tend to spend very compressed time, Tuesday morning to Thursday afternoon in Washington. Then they do have their flight allowances. They go home or go somewhere else. Do they see each other much on an informal basis? And what kind of difference has that made?
It's a huge difference. I'm a big believer in face-to-face communication as the only way to really get understanding and to be able to listen carefully and to find the threads that hold us together. And so, as I said a minute ago, I put 60 members in a room every night at 5 o'clock for 2 hours. If we'd done that by Zoom, I don't think it would have been as effective, right? So, but not only were we able to be there to meet, when I came to the House, Tip O'Neill was speaker, and in our freshman orientation, he said two things that I never forgot. He's, first of all, we're going to meet 5 days a week. We got a lot of work to do, and you can't do it if you're sitting back in your district. We got to do it here. Second thing he said is the most important thing to know about this place is always keep your word. If you don't keep your word one time, you're finished. Nobody will trust you. Nobody will believe you. So being together, building that sense of relationship, trust, knowing one another, knowing our backgrounds. And I'll tell you another cute story. So I had a young son, and I wanted him to be in the Cub Scouts like I had been in the Boy Scouts in the local public school where they went to school. So I got him into the Cub Scout troop, and I would go up there for meetings, and I would meet other members of Congress who had their kids in the Cub Scouts in that school. And we would sit, as the kids were doing whatever they were doing, and we'd talk about business back in the Capitol. So again, it's all human relationships. That's the basis of everything. I defy you to hate somebody that you know. Since Congress, I've done a lot of work with companies and usually unions to try to get a better relationship. It's kind of what I did in Congress. It's what I did in private life. And often we'd be called on when the company and the union had some big disagreement, big problem. And so we'd walk in a room, my son did this with me, and we'd have, 10 or 15 union leaders and 10 or 15 management people with the company. And we'd get them all around a table, and I'd say, before we get to the issues, let's just go around the room and have everybody talk about themselves for a few minutes, where they came from, where they grew up, where they went to school. And then I said, tell us the best thing that happened to you in the last year and the worst thing that happened to you in the last year. When I first did this, I thought, this is going to really fall flat. I mean, this is stupid. They loved it. It went on for an hour. And I'll tell you one anecdote. One time, one of the union leaders said, the worst thing that happened to me in the last year is my wife died. Nobody knew that. None of the union people knew it. None of the management people knew it. And so after the meeting, and we'd gotten to the issues, and it wasn't, completely easy, but it made it a little easier. People came up to him and hugged him. Management people were hugging him. That's human relationships. That's how self-government has to work. And so not being in town for more than, recently they were away for a month and they didn't show up. It's ridiculous. You've got to get people together if they're called on to make really complicated, tough decisions. So I'm hoping that when there's kind of new leadership coming on and new members assuming that leadership, that they can get back to that.
Yeah. Let me talk about one of the factors that may have contributed to this, that's in the system now. You were instrumental in the House in helping to pass children's health insurance after the failure of Clinton Care. And the origin of that was that Ted Kennedy said there are a lot of poor kids in this country, and they get no medical care. And he went to Orin, the conservative senator from Utah, and said, would you be willing to co-sponsor the bill with me? I'll put your name first, and we'll establish children's health care. And Hatch said, well, yeah, maybe, but it can't just be a federal program. And Kennedy said, fine, we'll make it a state federal cooperative program. And as a result, 8 million kids, suddenly poor kids, suddenly had health care in this country. I'm not sure that could happen today, given the pressure from the bases of both parties that have made it more challenging to achieve cooperation, and the reality of so many safe and deeply partisan congressional districts. Would Hatch dare to cooperate with Kennedy today?
It would be much harder, if not impossible. And to me, there are a couple of reasons to look to that are important to analyze and think about. The first one is the American people, and I may be overstating, in my view, are about as divided and polarized as they were in 1860. Now, that's a big statement, but it is somewhat, if not a lot, true. Why is that? I've thought a lot about this. And I give the main reason being the change in the information culture in the country. Where do people get information? Where do they get information they can believe or trust? A lot of things have contributed to this. One of them is the politicization of television channels. Fox, MSNBC, you can go down the list. We don't have Walter Cronkite and Walter Lippmann. Their newspapers are just about gone. And TV is on the wane, as you know. Especially here in LA, you know that. And then we have social media. And you have to really look hard at the way social media operates. If I'm a social media platform, first of all, and you're my user, whether it's Facebook or YouTube or TikTok or whatever, I know everything about you. I scrape your data every day. I know what you buy. I know who you talk to. I know what you say to them. I know what you think. And so I use algorithms. We used to call those algorithms, it's AI, to boost to you information that I know will keep you angry, anxious, upset, hateful, revengeful, and very angry at somebody that I know you don't like. Why do I do that? It's not to divide people. That's not my goal. My goal is to make money. How do I make money? I sell ads like TV stations used to, like newspapers used to. And I can get more for an ad if I can tell the advertiser, I've got 5 million people out there that I can keep their attention for 4 hours a day. And so they're going to see your ad every 10 minutes for 4 hours. And boy, have they made money. Have they made money. And I have no problem with that. I'm a capitalist. I want everybody to make money. But if it's endangering our ability to continue to be self-governing, I've got a problem with it. Now, what can I do about it? Not much. We have something called freedom of speech. I don't want the government to go to TikTok and say, you can't use that algorithm to divide people, to keep their attention. So what do? Well, full disclosure, in 1995, I voted for something called Section 230 of the Federal Communications Act. What is that? Well, that was a provision that held them harmless, platforms harmless, from any harm that would come from their content being distributed to people. At the time, the platforms came to us, and it passed by a big bipartisan majority. They said, if you don't hold us harmless, you're never going to have an internet economy. Google will never get off the ground, blah, blah, blah. Further than that, they said, we're just a dumb pipe. We don't put any content on. The people put it on. Maybe they should be liable, but not us. What we didn't know, and maybe they didn't know, was AI was coming. So not only are they not a dumb pipe anymore, they're the most intelligent pipe in human history, because they can boost to me information to keep me angry, anxious, and upset. And they figured out that making you angry and upset is a better way to keep your attention than fostering a good conversation between people who disagree, right? It's human nature. So we can try to do something about Section 230, and at the Council for Responsible Social Media, we're working hard at that to get Congress to pass an amendment. And I'm kind of hopeful that we can get it done. I've talked to members in both parties who see this as a problem, and I think we can put them back to be liable for their algorithmic or their AI behavior. And I don't know if you've noticed this, but there are 7 people that have committed suicide because of their relationship with a chatbot. So when it's full AI that's causing harm, the platform, the companies, the AI companies are being sued. And we've got some great legal scholars who work with us at CRSM, and I asked them the other day, I said, are those suits going to be thrown out on Section 230 like all the suits of all the parents who had kids commit suicide because of the way the algorithms worked in social media? And they said they will not be protected by Section 230 because the company created the content. The chatbot created the content. And I said, well, what will the platforms argue? They said, well, the platforms will argue that chatbots have First Amendment rights just like people. I said, do you think that'll work? And they said, probably not, but you never know. So that's where we are. So my sense is that factor, the information culture, has really divided people, and that's a major problem. Second problem, and this is a much deeper discussion, is the amount of time that members spend raising money. It is atrocious. It is out of control. And with Citizens United, now anybody can come in and spend millions and millions and not even have anybody know who's doing it. And the Supreme Court has allowed that. Now, getting campaign finance reform through Congress is about as close to impossible as anything you can think of. However, a bit of optimism. There's a group called American Promise, and if you're interested, look it up on the internet. They've been at work on this problem for 10 years. They're following the example of the suffragettes in 1919. And they've gone purposely to the state level to get state legislatures to pass resolutions encouraging Congress to institute a constitutional amendment to basically overcome Citizens United. And here's the best news. They are getting tremendous bipartisan support in red state and blue state legislatures. They now have 23 states that have passed this kind of a resolution. And if they get, I don't know what 3/4 of the states is, a bigger number than 23. I've never been good at math. But they are hoping by the end of next year to get to the number to be able to ratify a constitutional amendment. So this is, to me, hopeful. I mean, it is the people digging in and figuring out how in the heck do we make things better for self-government. And campaign finance reform would be near the top of my list.
Yeah. When I listen to this, especially the first part of that, I think what Orin Hatch would have said to Kennedy was, Ted, I think you're right. I worry about these kids. But given what people in Utah believe, what the information culture has led them to believe, I can't do this.
Exactly.
I'll lose my seat.
Yeah.
I'll be primaried and I'll be gone.
Yeah. And he got the gerrymander. He was a senator, but in the House, you've got the gerrymander problem. And we've now, it's totally out of control now. And now, as you know, here in California, we're now gerrymandering every place, and it's crazy. I mean, I had a district in St. Louis that was really a swing district. And as you know,
I know.
you were out there. I went door to door. Listen to this. To get elected in that district, I went door to door for 35 years. And when I say I went door to door, I mean I went door to door. Every day I was there, back in the district, I would go door to door for 12 hours a day and just listen to people. These are my customers. And if there's anybody left who was alive when I was out there today, if you went back and talked to them, a lot of them would tell you, I didn't like any of Dick Gephardt's votes. I disagree with him on everything. But I always voted for him because I thought he cared about us. Human relationships of, by, and for the people. That's it. It's simple. It's hard work. It's respect. It's listening. It's believing everyone has worth. Everyone has value. I used to tell the members of my caucus, none of us knows everything. I wish I did, I don't. Neither do you. Neither does anybody else on earth. I've got to listen to you. And we got to listen to the Republicans. They're going to know things that I don't know, that we don't know. They grew up in a different place. They had different life experiences. I can learn from them. And maybe I'll change my mind. Often after these 5 o'clock meetings, I'd have members come up to me and say, when we started to talk about immigration or whatever it was, I just knew the answer. I knew what our policy should be. But I listened to him and her and him and her. I've changed my mind. I almost wanted to put up the touchdown signal. We did it. We got it. We're there. So that's what we have to get back to, and it's really hard, and we're in a bad place right now. And the information culture and campaign finance are big factors.
Yeah. So listening to all this, how hopeful are you that we can bridge what a lot of people think is now an unbridgeable divide between Democrats and Republicans so that they can actually hammer out compromise solutions like you folks did repeatedly in the 1990s?
I am hopeful, and I know that I'm saying that with a lot of pessimism in the country and a lot of pessimism on a lot of people's parts. I guess my optimism comes back to the door-to-door thing. When you go out and meet the American people, and I did it, you realize that the vast majority of people, and this may not be the right adjective or word to use, but they're really good people. I may not agree with them on much of anything. That's not important. They want the same things. They want to have a family that can thrive and survive. They want to live in a community where people really care about one another and work together. They want to live in a state. They want to live in a country like this fabulous country that we were given. That's what they want. And there are lots of tests, Bob, where, organizations have gone out and given, 25 people who far left to far right, everything in between, disagree on everything, and they throw them a problem like climate change or immigration or whatever it is. And they come up after some listening and conversation over a period of time with a great solution that they all agree. So I'm optimistic because of the people that we're going to get this better. We're going to be better. We're going to get better governance. We're going to get better representatives at the state, local, and federal level that are going to be able to figure things out and work together to make it a more successful democracy. I must say that I worry in the near term that we stop having valid, trusted elections. And we're all working on that really hard. And I've been out in these states and talked to local election officials, and they are really good. They are really good. And they're proud of what they do. And so I'm, again, hopeful and optimistic that we're going to continue to have valid, trusted elections. That's kind of a fundamental underpinning of a democracy. And I think we're going to do that. So I think we can get back to where we need to be. You always got to remember two things. We had a civil war a few years ago, and we came through that. We've always had racism. We've always had hatred. We've always had horrible disagreements. The whole civil rights movement that I grew up in and lived through, I mean, if you'd look at the way it was when I was growing up and the way it is now, it's unbelievable progress. Unbelievable progress. We've gone so far in the right direction because of the people. Now, an underpinning that I worry about, and I shouldn't, is education. Education, not just K through 12, but post-high school, is really important, and that's what you all do here. If I had my way, we'd double the enrollment at every college and university in the United States and figure out how it could be affordable for people. Because kind of, to me, fundamental to American democracy is an educated population that can help govern themselves, right? And it would really help if we would, only a third to 40% of the American people have a post-high school education today, okay? That should be 60%. 60%. So there are some things to work on here, but I'm confident that we're going to be able to do that. There are a lot of issues to address. Anybody here who wants to get involved in something, there's a million ways to get involved. And it really takes that. Only the people can save this democracy. If the people don't care, if the people are too busy with their own private life and don't want to spend any moment working on this, we got a problem. We got a problem.
Okay, we're going to open this up to questions from the audience here in Town and Gown. There's a microphone there and a microphone there. Just go to the microphone and ask whatever kind of question you want. So we've satisfied everybody, all the answers? Go ahead.
So first of all, I gotta say thank you for making the time to come out here. And actually, as a young lobbyist at 19, one of the first people I learned about was Bob Dole. And because I am conservative, it's one of those things, if I have friends across both aisles, And that's how I've been able to do a lot of the work I've done from that time and to 27. And, the question I have is if you could have, maybe an hour or 2 hours in front of who we have in Congress and, excuse me, the Senate right now, is what would be your words of advice to them, especially seeing how far gone they've come in not being able to work with each other? Despite the polarization of the people, they should be able to use their better judgment to make those right decisions on what's best for our country, not just for their party. What would be your words to them right now?
Well, it would go back to what I've been talking about, which is you have to respect everybody. The word respect is really important. And let me just give you one recent example where people have kind of come together finally to get something done. It may not be that important. But you had today, I saw on the news this morning, Ro Khanna, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Thomas Massey. What? What was that? They were doing a joint press conference on this Epstein thing. And they finally have gotten to a place where it looks like maybe 100% of both the House and the Senate are going to vote for this thing. Now, it may not go anywhere or mean anything, but hey, that's progress. If Marjorie Taylor Greene had no respect for any Democrat, she never would have even sat down for a conversation with Ro Khanna. But they did. And I think after this is all over, they're probably going to say to themselves, hey, that was pretty good. I like that. I like doing that. That's better than just hating one another and fighting one another. So you made a very important point. How do you get representatives, even though the people who elected them may be hateful, to overcome that hatred and to set a role model for working together? That's what needs to happen. So if I had to say one thing, it'd just be that. Look, there's only one way to do this, and that's if you all respect one another. Go over and talk to the conservative, if you're a Democrat, that you hate the most or that you disagree with the most.
Could you talk to Newt? How did you and Gingrich get along?
Yes. I mean, I have a lot of beefs with Newt. I could go through that, but Newt was really smart. Newt cared about solutions to problems. He was really interested in healthcare. And in fact, I went to Newt right after he became Speaker, and I said, Newt, could we institute some debates in the House, not about issues, but put aside an hour a night or whatever, once a week, and just have a good old-fashioned Lincoln Douglas debate format on different issues. It's on C-SPAN so the people could witness it. And we did that. We did that like 10 times. So Newt was always interested in solutions. He would always talk to us. And let me finish your balanced budget story. So I got to tell this story before I run out of time. So it's 1990. George H.W. Bush called the leadership down to the White House, and he said, the deficit is out of control. Boy, is that an ancient statement. We probably had a $5 billion deficit or something. It was like chump change then. But anyway, he said, we got to get rid of it. We got to do something about the deficit. We need to move toward a balanced budget. We need a budget summit. And we said, and Bob Dole was in the room and so on. The Democrats said, George Mitchell and me and Tom Foley, we said, we're willing to come to a summit, but is everything on the table? He said, yes, everything but taxes. Because when I got nominated, I think in Houston, I gave a speech and I said, read my lips, no new taxes. I can't go back on that. We said, we understand, but we're not going to have a summit unless everything's on the table. We don't know what we're going to do. We've got to have all the options. He said, can't do it. 4 times we had that meeting, same result. Finally, he called us down to a dinner in the Oval Office, and he looked at us when we sat down, and he said, okay, I get the joke. We're putting taxes on the table. He handed a press release to Marlin Fitzwater, said, we're going to have a budget summit, and we've all agreed everything's on the table. And then George Mitchell said, would you put a comma after that and say including taxes? And George laughed. Oh my God, you people are hopeless. He did it. And we go outside waiting for the car to pick us up. And President Bush is standing next to me and he's going foot to foot. He's nervous. I said, Mr. President, what's wrong? He said, the fat's in the fire. I cite that story. That's leadership. Leadership is taking on your own side, not the other side. And that's what he did. He was a leader. He was my favorite president that I worked with. I love the man. And so then we ensued into 9 months of joint Senate House meetings with all the committees, all the ranking members, to try to get the elements of moving toward a balanced budget. And finally, we weren't getting anywhere, and I said to everybody, we got to get the members out of here. The press is coming up to members saying, we hear you're going to cut Medicare. Would you vote to cut Medicare? Oh, I'd never vote to cut Medicare. We're not going to have any votes for anything. I said, we got to get them off the campus. So we went to the officers club at Andrews Air Force Base and locked them up for 10 days and nights. All the committee chairs, ranking members, House, Senate together. And we kept negotiating. I'm sitting next to Newt. Newt's got a pile of magazines this high. I said, Newt, what are you doing? He said, I'm not going to vote for this. I said, well, President Bush told me that if we got a deal done, you'd produce half the votes, I produce half the votes. That's the deal. He said, I'm not doing that. So I went to Dick Darman, who was running it for Bush, and I said, Dick, your guy is off the reservation. He said, oh, no. He promised President Bush that he would get the votes if we got a deal. I said, okay. So we announced the deal in the Rose Garden, what used to be the Rose Garden. And while we're announcing it to the press and public, Newt's up on the Hill doing a press conference saying no Republican should vote for this. Oh, wow. So it took 2 votes. We lost the first vote. I went back to Darman and Bush and I said, hey, if you want me to get more votes, I got to have a few more cuts in defense so I can get some liberals onto this. They did. We passed it by 1 vote. Okay, let me finish the story. Clinton comes in as president in 92. We're now in a meeting in Little Rock in the governor's mansion, Tom Foley, George Mitchell, me, and the subject is what should be our highest priority for the first 2 years. And Hillary wanted to do health care and others had other ideas. I said, Mr. President, we just went through hell to get halfway toward a balanced budget. We have to finish it. He agreed, to his great credit, in my view. And we then went into a 9-month deal because Newt had told me, Newt became was whip, and he said, I know what you're going to try to do, and you will not get one of our votes. You won the House, you won the Senate, you got the president. It's your problem. I said, I got it. I agree. So we had to get all the votes on our side. That was the hardest thing I ever did. That's when I had to threaten people with being on a landing craft in Normandy. And we got the votes for that finally. But that still hadn't balanced the budget. I mean, it was the second big necessary step. But then we had the government shutdown with Newt right after he became Speaker in '94. But even though he shut the government down, and we all went through that for the first time, he was willing then, after all that mess, to work with Clinton, to work with us, to do further changes, which resulted in a balanced budget in 1999. And you may not remember this, I would forgive you if you don't. We had 3 years of a budget surplus. Imagine. We had meetings with Bob Rubin, who was Secretary of the Treasury. What are we going to do with the surplus?
Save Social Security first.
So, too long to answer, but you got to respect one another.
I actually greatly appreciate those stories because those stories are how I became the type of leader I could become for, all intents and purposes, the people. And even though you may not like each other, if it's about the greater good and what's going to affect people, that's all that matters. And that's what we need to get back to. That's why I left politics. But because of that, I might actually go ahead and give my hat back another run. So thank you, sir.
Good for you.
Thank you.
My timekeeper is being a little insistent, and Diego is standing there about to cut my head off. So I'm going to thank all of you in our audience, and I want to say how honored and how personally grateful I am that Richard Gephardt joined us here today. We're going to take like a 10 or 15 minute coffee break.
Can I, one
Yes.
last word? I want you all to think about how lucky we are to be Americans. This is the greatest country in human history. It's the wealthiest country in human history. And our responsibility is to pass it on to generations to come, to our children and our grandchildren. And when people say to me, boy, America's screwed up, it's a mess, I say, yeah, we've got problems. There's no doubt about it. We got to solve problems. But let me ask you a question. Do you see anybody trying to leave here? Do you see millions of people risking their lives to get here? If you're an American, you won the lottery. So, yeah, complain, but suit up and let's solve the problems. Let's respect one another. Let's love one another. And let's make this country better than it's ever been. Thank you.
Thank you.